Hey, hope everyone's doing well. I am excited to have one of my favorite people in the world, Dean Karrel, who is a LinkedIn Learning author, and he's also published a book that I really enjoyed. We'll dig deeper into some of my takeaways there, but I felt like your book was very genuine, very authentic, and it was very easy to digest. I really enjoyed how you wrote the book, and it came from a very like genuine place. Like I feel like a lot of people could relate to the lessons that you were distilling in us. And I'm curious as to how you came up with the name the Skyridge Group, which I know you're the
Right.
founder of that. But yeah, I think the listeners will have a lot of takeaways and finding their authentic voice, learning from sort of your story about how you found your confidence and how you found your style, and would love to dig a little bit deeper into, because I think what's unique about you is you have a way of building relationships organically and then also adding a lot of value to all of your network and your peers. And because of that, they're always thinking about you and they're always thinking of ways to help each other out. It's a very synergistic relationship with you.
Well, first off, Davidson, it's great to be with you today, and I've enjoyed listening to your podcasts. And you're an authentic and genuine, and just a really good person that I've enjoyed meeting, over the past number of months. And so to be able to talk about some of the work I've done and hear what you're doing and your current job, we follow each other on LinkedIn. um, Different paths, different career paths. You're in the early and middle stages of your career. I'm sort of at the later chapters, but it's the message of always be learning and developing and growing, I think is something we both agree about. And so to answer your first question, the Skyridge Group is actually, that's the street I grew up on. So when I left my prior job, I was in the publishing industry for more than 3 decades. And in this stage of my career, I wanted to do something different. And I said, I don't want to call it the Dean Karrel Group or Dean whatever. So the street I grew up on was Sky Ridge. And it's a nice name. And I said, we'll call it the Sky Ridge Group. And that's my business of doing coaching and sales training, motivational speaking. And then it also ties in with my courses with LinkedIn Learning.
Yeah, it has a nice ring to it, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a like, unless people ask you, they probably would have never thought it was your street name.
Right. It's my little bit of creativity. Well, it's like the well, the other side of it is it's not the name of your company. It's what's the substance of your company and the substance of your business. And so it's funny. People spend a lot of time with logos and branding and all of that, but at the end of the day, it comes down: what do you have to offer that can help me solve a problem, and or improve myself or enhance my skills? So. Um, it's funny, my website is as basic as you can get. And because I said that what's really important, again, goes back to the substance of what I'm able to hopefully provide and offer to people.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'll never forget this because I think sometimes I do this, but not always. But I remember the first time we met. You're one of the authors who I really enjoyed your courses, and I love reaching out to authors just to give feedback. What I liked about your courses, and I remember the first time we met, you came in like very prepared, and then you were really good at like connecting the dots. And then from our interaction, I had lunch with Taryn, and she
Mm-hmm.
kind of like took me under her wing and introduced and gave me a lot of good advice. And that has yielded a lot of dividends in terms of me just kind of opening my mind and just thinking differently. So that was really cool. And then I reached out to Amy Sell, and then it like I feel like you added so much value from a brief, less than an hour interaction. And it seems like you're very intentional about your relationships, but then it's like it's also organic, right? It seemed like you're asking for anything.
Well, I think that's what important for your listeners to remember is in our careers and in our personal life. Sometimes we try to overthink things, and for me, it's if I see you, I want to talk with you and have you meet people that I've met.
Mm.
And I just you don't need an MBA out of Harvard to be able to figure that out. And that's what I said. So because I don't have a Harvard MBA, and so how do you enhance your skills, enhance your abilities, and enhance and develop and grow your audience? And it's just by reaching out. You watched one of my courses. That's how we met.
Right.
And I said, thank you so much for watching one of my LinkedIn learning courses. I come in, we have lunch together, and I see somebody in the LinkedIn Learning or LinkedIn offices in New York who I knew, and I mean, it's just like hello and meet. And again, that's not that doesn't require an advanced degree. That's just a degree in, as you said, human relations and um, people skills, soft skills, social skills, and those are things that I talk about all the time.
Yeah, and it's funny because even when we were in the cafeteria, like it seemed like everyone knew Dean, right? Like just being next to you, everyone's like, "Oh my God, like how do you know Dean?" You know, it's like being next to Michael Jordan. It's like just being associated with you. Like I think my street cred went up by like 5 points or something. You know?
Well, it's a that's nice of you to say. I mean, I don't think I've got the Michael Jordan bank account, that's for sure. But it's a again, it goes to, one of the things I talk about all the time with the people I work with is, and you're really good at this, Davidson, is you smile, you say hello, and then you want to talk. And how hard is that? It's not hard at all. And so I've spent the latter part of my career focusing on building relationships, networking, and I think early in our careers, and this is something I talk about with the people I work with, we spend a lot of time maybe trying to over impress or think we have to, be at a certain level, or we get intimidated by people who have fancy titles or have been around a long time and and we think that we have to try to perform at a certain level. I think a great role model, the CEO of your company, Jeff Weiner, who's going to be leaving, is a great role model of. I mean, he's so down to earth and authentic. As is Ryan, who's taking over his spot as CEO. All of the executives that I've met from LinkedIn, from the LinkedIn Learning team to the solutions team to the marketing teams, they're all very approachable, and there's a lesson to be learned there that you can have a title that says CEO or senior vice president, but you still can be approachable, and those are the real leaders. That doesn't happen, unfortunately, in a lot of companies. So coming full circle here, it's when we're sitting in a cafeteria and you see somebody you wave, and then you say, hey, I'd like you to meet Davidson, or have you to meet Dean. So
Yeah, yeah.
basics.
I was so honored that like when you sent me your book, I think one of the big takeaways I got from your book was I felt like you were able to summarize like so many of the lessons that I've learned just throughout life, just from like the hard way, right? Whereas like if
Hmm.
I felt like if I had this book even a year earlier or at the beginning of my career, I think I would have accelerated so much quicker, right? But I had to kind of learn the hard way through trial and
Right.
error. So it felt like it was a nice summary of like, okay, I'm on the right path. I'm doing all the right things. It's just a matter of time and kind of like trust the process and everything will be fine. That's yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons I wrote it. So, Mastering the Basics is written by a guy who's been in business for, more than 30 years. I've had good days, I've had good bad days, I've had ups and downs like everybody else. So, the basic skills of being good to people, social skills, people skills, trying to keep things simple. Don't overthink and be yourself, be real, genuine, authentic. All of those words that sometimes get, we say, oh, what authentic or vulnerable, what are these words? But it's that's what my book is all about, because those are the lessons that I learned that helped me out. I mean, you've got a great story, that what you've been through during your life and how you developed and grew and went to develop your academic career, got into a great company. And how have you done that? You've worked really hard, right? I mean, this didn't happen by accident, your success. And So it's a tribute to you what you've done, Davidson, for yourself and developing and growing. So
Thank you. It's awesome because I feel like there's certain people you meet in your life that no matter what, like you always just feel good when you talk to them. And you're one of those few people that I think Kyle Paul is another one that's like that.
right.
Taryn's really good. Like I feel like people like you who like it just seems like there's never anything negative coming out of you, like you know what I mean, like even I'm sure even during this COVID crisis you probably have a way of framing it as like an opportunity, right, to like you said, like be with your son, right, be able to spend
Hmm.
quality time with love. It's like I'm sure no matter what the challenge is, you always have a way of framing it as something that you can benefit from that obstacle or that whatever that maybe a lot of people would view it as a negative. Um,
It's a tough time. I mean, this is a tough time for everybody, and it's a what I'm seeing in with people is there are people who are actually doing really well right now. their 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 work has shifted, and their businesses are okay, and then there are those who are just totally suffering. It's almost like they have and the have-nots, and then there's the poor people who are being they've kept their jobs or who are being furloughed or they're getting reduced salaries. So this is a difficult time for a leader, and I've actually found this, my messages, as you said, Davidson, I like motivating and encouraging and being optimistic and positive. But during this time I've had a difficult time in saying how best to approach this with people, and it's not the time for rah rah. This is the time to show empathy and compassion and passion. And as leaders, and you're a leader, Kyle's a leader. Leaders are those at any level within companies. It's a Kyle Paul we're talking about, your manager. It's or your the person who runs your group.
mhm.
It's how you communicate and listen, and and every organization is different. So there's no one formula right now, and I think that's important for leaders to know, is that um, what you do in your organization is going to be different. That's what's been handling at other companies, and it's a real struggle, I think, for many companies right now, because they're trying to determine how to navigate and keep their organizations above the waterline. And as you know, you've got friends and I've got friends who are really hurting right now. They're nervous, and now is the time when you have your arms open and you say, how can I help you? Or I'm here to listen. And saying that everything is going to be okay on June 1st is not the answer. People are trying to figure out, how am I going to make it through May 1st, which is, a few days away? How am I going to get through May 15th? So the key thing now is listening, and not turning your back on people who need
Mhm.
your support.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it seems like naturally people do go to you as the go-to guy. Someone, maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe they need to throw some ideas around to kind of use your wisdom as a sounding board, right?
Right.
So it sounds like your philosophy is, by doing the right thing and always doing the right thing, um, naturally people want to do business with you because they know that at the end of the day, like you have their best interests at the core, right?
Right. Again, so every situation is different. And so as your listeners are listening to the podcast, is like, how do I handle my current customer base, or how do I handle my current friends and work with my friends? Every situation is different, and it's evaluating. There's no, you know, complete turnkey answer for anything. And so again, it goes back to listening and being compassionate, showing empathy. This is where, another subject I talk about all the time is emotional intelligence. And there are some great courses in the LinkedIn Learning Library. A number of instructors have terrific courses. So I would urge, your listeners to watch those, because I find that emotional intelligence to me is probably the most important thing as a leader. And it's being able to listen. And it goes back to empathy and care, awareness, and those are things that, whether you're an entry level person brand new to business or the CEO of a company, your ability to handle and develop and understand emotional intelligence, and is, I think, an essential skill, especially now in this environment.
Yeah, and this goes back to, this reminds me of the story you told me when we had lunch about how, when there were some tough times through some of your previous companies,
Mm-hmm.
you were compassionate and you were, nice to essentially some of the people that have not, have had layoffs and whatnot. And
Right.
because of that, they remembered how kind you were and how you were listening and how supportive you are. And that's actually one of the relationships that actually helped you become a LinkedIn Learning author.
Yeah, it's it's very hard when, like, managers and leaders in all companies right now are having to sit across the table like we're doing today and talk, whether they're doing it by a Zoom call or Skype or on the phone, and saying your job has been impacted. Either you have to be let go, or you have to be furloughed, or whatever, your salary's being cut. That's very stressful. And as I told you at lunch, that was torture. It's torture for anybody. And I found when in the industry that I was in, we were going through massive changes, and I had to let go a lot of people one on one, and that took its toll on me, and it takes a toll on anybody. And for odd reasons, it's interesting. For probably 98%, 99% of the people I let go, I'm still friends with them, and I'm still in touch with them. And because even though it was torture for all of us, worse for the people who were impacted, but the fact that I was able to show that empathy and compassion and care, I think at least they understood that I did care for them. So a
Mm.
lot of these people have come back to me and they've said, there's opportunities or ideas that they've had. They've reached out and they said, Dean, we'd like to continue to work with you. And again, that's how I met people from LinkedIn Learning, and as the people who I'd worked with. So it's again, it goes back to emotional intelligence. Is an important thing that can help you throughout your life and throughout your career.
Yeah, and I'm sure you had a lot of practice, right? Was I'm curious as to when you were younger in your career, because I think a lot of times people think salespeople are kind of like born that way, right? I think
Mhm.
a lot of people think it's innate, or it's so. How much of it do you think it's learned and just practice, and how much of it do you think it's a natural um, thing based on like how you were born and your personality and things like that?
I think we all think of a stereotype of what a salesperson is, and then we learn of what sales is all about. And what sales is all about is shut up and listen, and ask questions, and have a conversation. Be curious. What are you working on, Davidson? What are the things that you're trying to develop in your career? How can I help you? That's what a good salesman does. And I was very fortunate when I first got into sales. I think we talked about this. I graduated with a degree in communications, and I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. And then I realized that there were like 10,000 other people who wanted to be sports broadcasters too. And so with a degree in communications and a minor in journalism, I got into the publishing business and got into sales. And I had a great mentor, a great first manager. Gary Gutchell is his name, and he's somebody I'm still in touch with. And he taught me the basics of sales and the importance of listening, knowing your customer, and planning and preparation. Nothing to do with, in your face sales techniques and, the lines of, always be closing, and the Wolf of Wall Street type tactics that I can't stand.
Mm.
The true salesperson, the real sales professional, is somebody who says, tell me about your business and what are your pain points and how can I help you? And you're not selling, you're listening. Um, those are the lessons that I learned early on about, and the other thing is just be yourself. And
Mm.
if you try to act like a salesman, like the stereotype, hey, how are you? Good to see you. Let me talk about my great new product or service. That falls flat on your face. Unfortunately, we see those people who reach out to us on LinkedIn who connect and they say hello, and then the next message to us is they're trying to sell something. And I feel so badly for these people because I'm thinking, who's training you? Who told you to do that? And it's so sad, and they're trying so hard, but somebody told them, connect with Dean or connect with Davidson, and then 15 seconds later, it's like, hi, are you trying to leverage your coaching business? And I'm thinking, oh man. And they were never trained. So you've got great managers, great leaders, great trainers at LinkedIn. God bless. You're so fortunate. And as was I when I first started. So this is where in sales it separates the good companies from the weaker ones by having those mentors, leaders, trainers who can get you moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome too because of technology and things like LinkedIn Learning and so many other resources out there that I think the barrier to entry to have quality resources at your fingertips is it's so readily available. So I do like how, because prior to platforms like LinkedIn Learning, it would cost a lot to have these amazing trainers like yourself come in and do a workshop and a webinar, or I mean,
Right.
instructor-led training. But because of technology, now I get access to the world's greatest, and I don't necessarily have to pay for like the travel and all that. So I do think now more than ever, but I do think we're almost inundated with so much that it's hard to really know where to focus. So I think that's one of the challenges that we deal with.
Yeah, it's there is a lot available, and but there is a lot available that's so good, and it's finding that list of materials. I mean, I watch. I mean, you watch. I notice you watch a lot of courses on LinkedIn Learning. You take a lot of courses, and I watched one today on persuasive sales, and it was a new one that just came out, and high level course on sales as far as this the how our brain impacts our thinking about how we sell, how we buy, and how we market. And I was really was more of like I would say a senior level class in sales.
Mm.
And so here I am. Again, I've been selling for a long time. I'm still taking and I'm still taking courses and still learning. And if I had stopped learning about sales 30 years ago, I would be not in the sales business anymore. I'm learning about artificial intelligence. You have some great programs that you use at LinkedIn, and other companies use it also. Artificial intelligence. It's tracking the amount of time we speak and how many times our customers talk, our clients talk, and how many times that we don't. And it's like, it's pretty striking, isn't it? It's a big wake up call.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to learning. And I embrace technology, and the learning and the abilities that can offer us. And I think artificial intelligence is one of those in how we sell.
Yeah, I do love those tools, and like you said, it is sobering the first couple times when you look at the data and you're like, ooh, okay. But it does give you a real gut check. Like sometimes you think, you're at a certain point and then you look at the data and you're like, okay, there's a lot more I can improve on. But, at least I have that data point that I have the awareness that, okay, maybe I should talk less. So I'm so grateful for these tools. And I think every company should have a tool like Gong. I think you're
Yeah, right. It's when you're nervous, the tendency is to speak. So that's whether it's in business or our personal lives, whether we're dating somebody or meeting a new person. It's that fear of dead air.
right.
So you feel you have to say something. I'm a boy. I'm a talker, so I love to talk. So it's like I have to. I mean, I'm talking a lot today with you, and when I'm with a client or a customer, I actually write down. Like stop talking, listen, and even to this day, I have my little notes. I'll tell you something funny. I have my little notes when I do my courses. When I go out to Carpinteria, I have some of the directors and producers. They love my notes. Cody Jones is a great one, a great director out there, and he has, Dean, did you bring your notes with you? And it's one of them. Stop talking, slow down. I talk too fast. Take a breath. So it's here's somebody. I mean, again, I'm been around a long time, and I still have my little reminders of the importance that I need before making, whether it's a presentation for a LinkedIn Learning course or whether you and I are talking right now, making sure that I'm focused on my key points. Um,
Yeah.
Interesting.
It, and I think you do have the perfect balance of just enough preparation, but it's not like too much because I do think sometimes we can paralyze ourselves by almost like preparing too much.
Right.
So where do you find that balance of preparing so that it's you show that you've done your homework, but not too much to the point where it's too rigid?
That's a learning curve. I think that's my first sales call. My very first sales call I ever made was I hadn't gone through formal training yet, and I'd moved to a new territory, and I'd gone different era. It was just before computers, and I went to see a customer, and I had three carry-on bags of marketing material. Talk about being over-prepared. I basically brought my whole home office with me to the customer, and they were hysterically laughing, and not hysterically laughing, but they were like amused. And so there is a point. It's learning what is the right amount. We all go through the points where we over-prepare, then we don't sleep, and
Mm-hmm.
then our stomach gets in a knot. And I'm a big proponent of planning and preparation, but I've learned that just what you said, Davidson, is absolutely right. There's a line where you don't want to get crazy with it, and you don't want to forget the mission, and you can be over, stressed out. But when you over prepare, sometimes you get stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of it is that when you see a customer, if you don't know the background about them before you've met them, then you're underprepared. So I'm a believer that don't wait. If you only have a half an hour on the phone or 15 minutes on the telephone with somebody or 15 minutes in person or whatever, or in a Zoom call or whatever, and you ask, well, Davidson, tell me about yourself. Well, that's now we're wasting 5 minutes. I know what you've told me, and I've researched you before we met that day in New York, and as did you with me. And it's knowing, okay, tell me a little bit about your time in Philadelphia, the time you went to school, and the coaching that you did with the person, that you worked with before you came to LinkedIn. So it's knowing that information, but it's also leaving it open to filling me in with more information when we had that lunch. So I learned a lot, and it's soaking all of that in. Is that an MBA course? No. Those are when I go back to mastering the basics, that's just it's emotional intelligence, it's common sense, and it's the ability and the thinking of let me learn a little bit more about you. And it's that goes a long way in making you successful as a salesperson and as a person in general.
Yeah, I think one of the big takeaways from a lot of your courses, I think it's finding your authentic voice.
Hmm.
How do you find the good balance of being open to trying new things and maybe taking the best out of a lot of your mentors or people who are top performers, but not too much to the point where you're almost like overreaching?
Yeah. That comes with experience, Davidson. I think when we first get into sales and in business, either we try to model ourselves after one person, and then there comes a point, maybe late 20s and maybe late 30s and maybe late 40s, and some people it's in their 50s when the light bulb goes off and it says, you know what I need to do is take some good things that I've learned from Kyle, from Davidson, from Taryn, and say, how do I take those skills and use them for my abilities? It's also, we can't change who we are. Davidson, I'm not going to make you into a loud, aggressive salesperson. That's not you. That's not me either. So how do you take and enhance your skills, your foundation, and build off of that? When we try to change ourselves, I mean, if I was to go and act like, hey, let me tell you something, Davidson, about this product and service I have to offer and like to sell you this pen, that's not going to work. Right? And I'm my hands wave, I smile, I talk. That's me. So how do I refine that and work off of the positives that I think I'm able to have and build off of that? And that's a learning curve. That doesn't happen. Didn't happen for me when I was 25. It took me a while.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think what would be so how does one maybe one or two things that people can do. Let's say they're only 1 or 2 years into their sales career, or maybe this is their first time in a
Hmm.
closing role. Maybe they're a BDR for a year
Right.
or two. Um, because I do think it's easier to say like be authentic, but I do think sometimes people aren't even sure what that means, because I do think a lot of managers spend a lot of time like talking about feedback and giving constructive criticism. um, so maybe two questions. One, what advice would you give to managers who are very, maybe their managers and the managers' managers also very into feedback,
Hmm.
and sometimes I do think managers maybe focus too much on feedback. I don't know what
Right.
that balance of good enough some feedback, but not to the point where you're hurting someone's confidence.
Right. That goes to, we're all under pressure to build the business and bring in revenue, and there's the number of the month and there's the number of the quarter. Do this, Davidson, do this, Dean.
Mm.
And as a manager, what you have to fight and focus, hopefully, with the people you work with, is not to help them improve 10 things. But Davidson, where you can improve is focus on these two things. And, and I think that's where the best coaches come in, is not a laundry list of fix this and do that, and then you get confused and you're overthinking. So it's a priority of what's the number one thing that we need to work on between May 1 and May 30th, the next 30 days. Davidson, don't worry about this quarterly report. Don't worry about this project for the CRM. What I want you to do is focus on getting your listening and speaking ratio down from 65% to 55%. And
Mm.
on the next 10 calls that you make, I want you to lower it by 10%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can do that. It's achievable goals, achievable objectives. But again, we're all right now, what's happening. I mean, I'm saying that, and in some companies they're doing it well, and in some companies you'll hear them saying, I know there's the coronavirus and I know the business is off, but we got to fill that pipeline. And I hear that and I'm going, oh man, there are people having nervous breakdowns right now.
Yeah.
And those are the lousy managers, and they're managers, they're not leaders. The leaders say, Davidson, you're not going to be able to hit the levels that you were doing 3 months ago with your customers. But what you need to be doing is focusing on these customers who are doing well. You're going to be calling cruise lines to try to have them do, LinkedIn learning courses? No.
Right.
So, but you can be doing this with the university accounts that you're connected with or doing online programs. So it's that focus of the right leaders who know the right way to enhance and develop the teams that they're managing.
That's good advice, and I do feel lucky hearing you say that my manager is pretty good about focusing on a couple core things, so that makes
Right.
me feel good.
Sadly, though, it's like, again, it's what I've found in my coaching work over the past few years is that a lot of companies aren't acting that way, and they're not in training their teams to focus on a few things. They're going right from, I call it going from 0 to 60. It's like saying hello and trying to go to a close in a call, which is the worst thing that happens. Those are the things we see on when people connect with us on LinkedIn, going from 0 to 60, going from hello to close in the first call. And that happens at a lot of companies. So if you're 1 year, 2 years out of college or any training or pre-training getting into sales, the important thing is to hopefully find the right company to work for, have the right leader and mentor. I mean, again, we've talked about this at our lunch, and again, there's more than one right answer, and listening from a variety of different people. It's also listening to your peers. So you've got some great salespeople you've interviewed on this podcast. And I mean, early on, and a couple of times, you've had some great salespeople. And it's like, what did they tell you? A couple of them that have been with the company for a number of years. Those are the ones you learn from, saying, Davidson, you know what? The mistake I made early on, I was trying to do X, Y, and Z. They were telling you their nuggets, their pearls of wisdom about what works and what doesn't. And those are the things that you want to do, is be able to soak that in from those who have been around, and um, or soak it in, or at least listen to it, and listen and take the bits of advice that you think are the most appropriate that can make you successful.
Yeah, no, that's a good takeaway. And I'm curious because you do work with so many different companies, and I feel like you have a lot of a variety or wealth of knowledge because you do dabble in a lot of different companies, right? Like you're not working with
Hmm.
just the same company over and over.
Right.
What are some trends that you're seeing, and what are some predictions? Because I do think at the core, sales is sales, right? It's about relationship building and
Hmm.
adding value and solving problems. But what have you noticed that, and especially with Corona, like what do you think would be different, maybe even a year from now compared to a few years ago?
Well, what we're finding right now is that everybody has their predictions and no one knows what's going to be happening. I mean, that's the interesting thing. We're all tossing it up in the air saying, this is how it's going to be. Are we going to be traveling as much? Uh,
Right.
I spent my sales career, I love doing face to face sales calls. And that's what my goal was always to see the customer face to face. And I would say that to the sales teams I worked with. And
Mhm.
obviously, even before coronavirus, that's been scaling back. And certainly, a lot of companies, your company, for example, it's heavily phone contact, and it is, and it's, um, but it's, and now it's, are we over zooming contact? You know, it's funny. People are saying, let's do a Zoom call. Well, why don't you just pick up the phone? Have a 3-minute conversation. We don't have to have a Zoom call for everything, a video conference.
Uh,
But the days of me hopping on a plane going to Chicago and seeing 2 customers and flying back, that's dramatically changed even before coronavirus, and it'll probably continue to change going forward. And remote working, what we're all doing right now, um, is probably going to be more acceptable. Again, I'm old school. I love, I thrive, I would thrive working in the same building with you and Taryn and other Kyle, your whole team, because you feed off of that energy. And that's how you learn. When you're at your home trying to do a call and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you've had a rough day, that's torture. That's when the sales is a lonely profession. And I don't think people talk about that enough. It's a when you're having a bad day and you're alone at home making calls, that's not fun at all. And you combine that with what's going on in our cities and society, that's a double whammy. So when we get through this, which we will, I think there will be a structure where we're working from home, we're working in offices, and I think there still needs to be we will get back to seeing people face to face. And I do plan going, to seeing customers and being in California, Chicago, or wherever it might be, or being in Manhattan and seeing people face to face. I think that's important, but it's the evolution of sales and it's the evolution of business.
yeah.
People say, "Oh, it's different than how it used to be." Well, it's the world changes, and 20 years ago we weren't using phones. We didn't have cell phones 20 years ago. We didn't have iPads 20 years ago. We didn't have laptops. So how do people do business? Well, the sales evolves, and it's going to evolve again. And I don't have that answer where it'll be, but it'll evolve this year, and it'll evolve 10 years from now again. So that's the way business and sales works.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dean. I really enjoyed our conversations. I feel like there was a lot of takeaways, and just I think what really resonates with me is you still have a beginner's mindset, right? Like, you're obviously super wise, you have a lot of experience, but you're always open to learning new things, whether it's the neuroscience of sales or I feel like it's awesome and refreshing to see that despite all of your success and your managerial experience and a lot of the deals, you're still open to listening and trying new things. And just, I think that's amazing. I think obviously that's why you've had so much success and and I think you're also very authentic and genuine. And I think you're okay with making mistakes, right? Like you're
Hmm.
owning up, like, hey, like I'm human, like I'm gonna mess up. And I
Hmm.
think salespeople, we're very hard on ourselves, right? I think that's one of the reasons why we get into it because it's one of those professions that you can never be number one, right? Or at least
Right.
forever. Like this, it's cyclical. And I think by you expressing like, hey, it's okay to mess up, it's okay to practice and screw up sometimes, I think you're giving people permission that um, it's okay to be human, right? I mean, that's natural because I think a lot of times a lot of salespeople don't talk about some of like the internal battles that we go through, right? When
Oh, yeah.
failures.
It's a that's one of the hidden things about sales. I was a senior vice president. My last job was before going on my own was senior vice president of sales of a big publishing company. I worked with a lot of people, a lot of big customers, and I had moments of doubt and self-confidence hits like, wow, what's going on? But when the marketplace changed in 2008 with the financial crisis, and so it's okay to be honest, but it's also important to show that you've got the skills and the confidence to recover from that. And that's where you separate, I think, that the mediocre leader from the leader who can hopefully take teams to the next success levels. I've again, going back to when you and I first met, I always love when people are open to learning from others. When you're a classic example of that, and that's a person who reaches out. You interview a lot of different people, you meet a lot of different people, you write regularly online on LinkedIn. I mean, you check off a lot of the boxes, but that doesn't mean that every day is perfect, because I know it isn't, because you're human.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of sales, and especially now in sales when we're driven by hitting numbers, and it's really hard right now in a lot of businesses. There are no numbers to hit because it's like you can't. And again, this goes back to we all need to work and reach out to others for empathy, compassion, passion, and care, and say, I understand what you're going through. So I really thank you for letting me join you, Davidson. You're a good man.
Thank you, Dean. I honestly, I'm not lying. I always feel like $1,000,000 better after speaking to you. If it's like a little, I feel like you're really good with being intentional about your relationships. Like you're very thoughtful and just reaching out, saying hi, and hey, I've thought about you, and it's just a little like I don't know. Do you schedule time in your calendar where you do that? Like I'm just curious if there's a structure behind that.
I have my list of people that I like to check in with. I'm on LinkedIn, every day like you are, and you'll see things and you'll see what people write. And again, it goes back to emotional intelligence. I reached out to, and Dave Crenshaw was public about this because he posted about it. But Dave Crenshaw is an unbelievable instructor. He's got courses that are watched by millions of people, and he's an extremely sensitive person, very caring person. And with all that was going on with the virus when it first started, I knew this impacted him. And I just kind of reach out and say hello. And again, I'm not speaking out of school because he talked about this in a video he posted a couple of weeks ago, talking about, Dean Karrel reached out. And so my scheduling for that is just trying to be aware and trying to say, think about what people are going through. And I have a checklist of the people I coach and the people I work with and the people I've connected with. I mean, I feel a lot for the folks out in Carpinteria,
Uh,
California, where the studios are. I mean, they're doing a lot of remote work now with instructors, that's tough. I mean, that's a whole new thing that they're going through. And, but as are you. I mean, Davidson, you love being in the cafeteria in the Empire State Building. I mean, you walk around, you say hello to people, and no one's doing that right now. That camaraderie is missing. And so when you say what do I do, as well, what we're doing now is important, but it's also you find 4 people during the rest of the week, tomorrow and Friday, or next week, or whatever it might be, and reach out and say, how's business? You everything okay? How you doing? How are things? And that means so much to people who may not be the ones, or they may be reluctant to reach out. And people crave contact, communication, even though they may say, I'm an introvert, I'm very happy. Uh, Reach out to everybody. I think it's important.
Thank you so much, Dean. I think there's so many nuggets of wisdom. I think it's super, to your point, you keep it simple, right? It's all about genuine human connection and just listening and empathizing and just being thoughtful and just really honestly, we can summarize it in just one sentence. It's I'm thinking about you, or I'm thinking,
Hmm.
I thought about you. And
That was Dave Crenshaw's line. That was actually his headline. I'm thinking about you. And he said, and I think so. You've just got it there, Davidson. That's great. Good for you.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. How do you prefer to be reached out to?
Again, if people want to follow, I love, my communication is on LinkedIn. And so, my company's the Skyridge Group, but I'm on LinkedIn every day, couple hours a day. My courses are on LinkedIn Learning in the sales category. And that if people want to connect with me, I'm happy to communicate. I love doing that, as you know. And when this is all over, Davidson, we're having a nice big breakfast in the cafeteria.
Looking forward to that for sure.
Yes, me too.
Well, enjoy time with precious time with your son and your family, and thank you so much for your wisdom and your. I think do you give permission to a lot of salespeople just to be okay with messing up and learn from their um, failures and everything. So thank you, and I really appreciate.
Thank you for inviting me, Davidson. I really appreciate it. And you're a good guy, and people are fortunate to be able to cross your path, as have I. So thank you so much.
Good night. Take
Good
care.
night now.